Hi all, thanks for joining me on our next version of the live series. I've got a fantastic group of guests with me talking about talent and attraction and retention of last year, but also this year. I myself is Sam Smith, one of the senior consultants here at Amicus, obviously Amicus being a fairly niche tech recruitment agency. And I'll kick it off with Luke. Luke, can you just quickly intro me to yourself, please?
Of course, thanks, Sam. So, hi everyone, I'm Luke. I'm the talent lead for technology hiring at a startup company called Clio. We're a kind of fintech scale-up who build a financial advisor using AI. So my role is to manage a team hiring across engineering, data and analytics. My background's kind of across tech hiring for the last 7 or 8 years in agency, exec search and RPO, and then internal as well. So yeah, that's me.
Fantastic. And Jon?
Hi. I'm Jon, the people and talent lead at Treasury Spring. Very similar actually to Luke in terms of a fintech scale up, a little smaller than Clio, where we help companies we've created a digital portal to help companies with cash investment opportunities. My background's in recruitment as well, moving into people the last few years. And yeah, that's what I'm here to do, help us kind of grow and build structure at Treasury Spring.
Brilliant. And Lindsey?
Yeah, thanks. So I'm Lindsey. I'm talent partner at Nearform. We're a technology consultancy, started in Ireland, but now all across Europe, America, and newly India. Similar 8-9 years recruitment experience, started an agency, went internal, somehow have fallen into the high growth consultancy side of internal.
Fantastic. Well, obviously, we're going to be speaking a little bit about attraction and retention, not only last year, but sort of what this year is going to look like, mainly focusing, obviously, with all of our backgrounds on the technical hires within companies. But I suppose for everyone here, sort of, how did they find last year? Sort of, I know it was difficult for a number of sectors, but how was everyone's hiring last year? What did people find?
Terrible. We just start on that. So I was in the consultancy world, unfortunately went through a talent team redundancy last year as part of cuts. The redundancy world was hit particularly hard. The start of the year, was really slow, and I know it was the same at Nearform as well. A lot of companies shedding roles. Unfortunately, very much junior weighted as well, which was the really sad bit to see last year. I obviously was really lucky to land on my feet here, and we noticed it ticked up a little bit throughout the year, but then December, Jan has really ticked up, which is brilliant. But it's fun getting used to that pace again when you've effectively had a year out. Certain roles never really die down, do they? Senior JavaScript devs, tech architects, senior directors, they're still technical, and data, it never slows.
No, of course. I know obviously Luke Clio went through quite a lot of growth last year. So how did you find it compared to other years in your recruitment career so far?
Yeah, we were very lucky at Clio. Obviously, what we do is obviously build this financial advisor. So when you get times of economic downturn, the business ends up actually doing better because we're acquiring users more organically. But yeah, we basically doubled the size of the business last year, which was exciting to go through. Obviously, there were lots of conversations of people who had been in similar situations, going through redundancies, going through kind of layoffs, and so for us, the market was there and available, which was great to see. And we were able to kind of get a lot of people back into work at Clio, which was a nice thing. In terms of, I guess, how the year went, it started out very much hyper growth. And I think come the middle of the year, we decided to kind of take stock of the growth and actually kind of reevaluate things because, despite the business doing well from a financial and growth perspective, we didn't want to get kind of ahead of ourselves and kind of a bit arrogant with that growth. So we slowed things down to make sure that we had the runway in place to make sure that, if financial headwinds did get a bit difficult, then we were fine. And we wanted to keep a fairly lean team. So the focus shifted from kind of hyper growth to still growth, but like how do we get one person to effectively do 2 people's jobs? And that's not to say we're overworking them, but we're looking for kind of best of the best talent out there. It went back to probably kind of a faster pace and a higher velocity of scaling towards the end of the year. But yeah, I mean, for us, as I said, it was quite a positive year for us.
And I suppose within attraction, did anyone see sort of any trends sort of come about, whether that be via applications or headhunting? Sort of, did anyone see anything in particular that stood out last year?
I think there was a big shift, at least from what I saw, of kind of moving away from, I guess, standard and linear job progression. I think historically it was very much you go into a field and you learn a set of skills, you move up that way. I think probably partly because of the level of redundancies we've seen across the tech sector in the last few years, there's a lot more kind of diagonal and sideways moves. People kind of taking transferable skills and wanting to apply them in a different way and kind of taking a bit more control over their own careers and livelihoods, which I think keeps it makes it harder from a recruitment perspective, because you can't be quite as black and white with we need these skills and so on, but it keeps it really interesting because you have some really kind of insightful conversations with candidates about not necessarily how their experience lines up, but how their skills and behaviours could line up. And so I think it challenges you as a recruiter to think outside the box, and you end up with some really fantastic hires that I don't think a few years ago you necessarily would have made.
Also, and obviously yourself, John, being a little bit of a smaller startup, you said, did you notice anything over the last couple of years that might have been different from the super high growth obviously Clear may have expected?
Yeah, I guess the probably the major difference I've seen is just more applications to be going through. I guess that comes from people being made redundant or looking for jobs when they, I suppose, particularly when they don't have a job, and additionally making it a bit harder to headhunt because people are a little bit more reticent to leave a job that they're in, especially if they feel safe at that point. They probably don't want to move, and particularly to the places that I've worked at the last few years, smaller startups, it can be a hard enough sell at the best of times. But that's been quite difficult. I think there's this balance though that I've also seen, in the sense that when Meta's letting go of 20% of its workforce, maybe the stability that people felt at a larger company isn't quite there as well. So I think that kind of plays into a little bit what Luke was saying about what people are looking for too. So that can fit in with hiring managers, where maybe you can be a bit more kind of flexible around the skills that the specific skills you were looking for, if you can find someone who maybe adds certain things that weren't on the job spec to start with.
The stability piece is one that we've really started to notice. People asking a lot more about the financials of the business, the long-term impact, the runway, and wanting to get ahead of that. But I think that the other kind of big trend that I've seen off the back of that is when, as you said, right, the likes of Metas are making all these redundancies. Stability is kind of, it's not really a guarantee anymore. So you get people focusing on other things. And I think mission alignment's one that we've really seen pick up. And thankfully, Clio's got a fairly good mission that people align to and want to work for. But a lot of people kind of pulling out in processes to go and say, I want to go work in climate tech or health tech or something like that, because if you don't know how long you're going to be somewhere, you at least want to be somewhere where you can really believe in what you're doing. So we're seeing a lot more of that rather than just kind of following the money, so to say.
Yeah, we've had a lot more people ask also the stability, the financials, how many layoffs. Nearform's been really lucky that we kept our heads down through 2023 in many ways, and didn't grow too much, and have been really careful about it. But even just today, we had someone message an engineer on LinkedIn, basically going through, the recruiters have told me this, but I want to know from someone in the business, were there layoffs, was there this, was there that? Because people are conscious, particularly for consultancies, because consultancies did a lot of that laying off last year.
Drawing on that point, what position do you introduce that discussion, I suppose, about funding and stability? Does that come straight from the get-go? Is that sort of down to like early stages of interviews, or how do we prep sort of obviously the hiring manager then for those sort of conversations? I know that's a bit of a 2-point question, but does anyone have any ideas on that?
And from the side of how early does it come up, it's part of my sales pitch on the call is, in many ways, we did the boring thing last year. We grew when we needed roles. We were really careful whenever a project didn't come in. We didn't overcommit and hire, which is something we have to balance a lot and takes a lot of time here. You just be open with people. It's not a very glossy sales pitch, but it's what happened. And yeah, I think people appreciate that. In terms of prepping hiring managers, the call I was on before this was literally a hiring manager training call with the team. We prep them to be open. No, obviously, don't start having a rant about your day, but do, be open of, right, well, this did happen, this didn't. And again, we're lucky we fared a lot better than our competitors, but yeah, people always know there's a risk with consultancy. So we've mitigated 99% of that risk, but there's still the 1%.
Is anyone seeing anything, I suppose, in the current market then? Obviously, we mentioned that there has been an uptake in sort of roles available. There's slowly being less redundancies on the market, whilst obviously still people are being affected. Sort of, is there anything that sort of people are seeing in that current market that's affecting sort of attraction? I suppose that's a current piece to talk about. Like, is there anything that sort of is a bit different to then how things were last year, with a lot more obviously applications, people were looking to go into different areas of tech? Is there anything that people are seeing on that current piece at the moment that's maybe a bit different to how we were last year?
I actually thought that we'd see more difference to start with, and to be honest, I don't think that there has been. The first, it's only 5 weeks into the year, so there's not like an enormous sort of data set for it. But I've been personally surprised by the fact that there's still redundancies coming through, and that pattern hasn't really changed. Which, from my perspective and from people that I've spoken to, I guess, like, there's still caution about how quickly we kind of want to go back to hiring. I think there are more jobs out there, and you're probably better placed actually to see generally that there's more going out. But I know from our perspective, having grown fairly quickly, I mean, we're a company of 50 people now, but adding, we were 22 at the start of last year. So percentage-wise, that growth, we still feel quite cautious about how quickly we want to be growing. And I actually thought that probably that the market would have changed a bit more. I don't know if anyone else agrees with that, but it seems to have not yet, from what I can tell.
Yeah, I think similar on my side. Still seeing lots of redundancies out there, seeing kind of companies go on hiring freezes. I think the companies that are growing are happy to make the most of that situation. We're still kind of growing at a decent pace, decent velocity. So yeah, it's not too much different to last year. One thing that I think maybe minor trend that we're starting to see is candidates be a bit more wary of, I guess, almost future-proofing themselves from a skills perspective. A lot of people kind of doing a lot more ad hoc training, a lot more kind of courses and certifications, keen to kind of further their skills, particularly, if we look at kind of the AI as a field, and it's a bit of a buzzword, but, people wanting to make sure that they've got the skills that will get them jobs when they come up, which gets ties into what I was saying earlier about kind of wanting to look at more of these diagonal career paths, so to say. But as I guess to kind of echo what Jon said, it's not massively different to last year.
No, of course, and I think from, as Jon said, I'm, I suppose, positioned in a place that I see a lot of different companies obviously hiring, less so one or two companies doing lots of hiring. But from at least from my side, I've seen more of an indication of things going back to just post-COVID. So a lot more companies at least putting those initial invitations to interview out to speak to. Obviously, I speak to tech candidates on a hourly basis, so that's my. So the difference that I'm seeing is just more initial conversations starting. So I don't know if that's just the market trend now picking back up, but obviously with that, a lot of people are sort of still doing the volume of direct applications and things like that. So I wanted to sort of ask yourselves: has there been anything from an attraction perspective that sort of you want or you've thought has set yourselves apart, or has there been anything you've implemented that have seen? Obviously, Jon, sort of with the direct applications you've had, Luke, obviously with the volume of hiring that your teams have had, and then obviously Lindsey with sort of, I suppose, the differences that come with consultancies. Is there anything that you've implemented over the last 6 months, year that has seen the sort of maybe quality or volume or anything sort of change in your attraction?
I mean, I only joined Nearform about 7 months ago, so we've just been doing a lot of changes within talent in general, and nothing like groundbreaking, but refining things. So probably too early to see what trends that brings out in comparison to before. I also probably I was actually working on setting up our India team, so that's a completely different market. Stuff we did there, we're starting to rely more on the referral side and going from that, but I don't know whether that's due to that being a new market for us or the current climate. So yeah, I can give an answer next year.
I think similarly, you know, there's nothing groundbreaking. You know, we have a culture of iteration and experimentation, so there's always kind of A/B tests that we run on adverts and everything, but by and large, the strongest candidates tend to come from headhunts or referrals. So trying to kind of find innovative ways to push that is leading to some successes. But yeah.
Right, and I know a big piece that has been sort of discussed with some of the other talent teams that I obviously work with is sort of identifying that attraction strategy very early on in sort of growth, sort of, and obviously retention as well at the same piece. But sort of, how is that sort of set up for the year then? Sort of, obviously we're at the new year, sort of attraction strategies are sort of being rolled out, at least what I'm seeing. So has there been anything, or what are the benefits, I suppose, of having that already established already so early on in the year? Has anyone sort of had anything put in place, or at least looking to put anything in place already?
I guess from my perspective, I'm in the same position as Lindsey in terms of being fairly new. So my big focus is on trying to put something along those lines in place. It's probably more around retention than in, I guess it's broadly the same piece of work, but probably more around retention for us and adding in that kind of structure for people. You asked what the benefits were. I think there's kind of fairly obvious benefits to that. But I think, yeah, having that kind of organized is really important for any company, but particularly for kind of the scale ups as much as possible. But yeah, I'm also quite early stages, so difficult to say how much impact that is having from my perspective right now.
Sometimes it's like getting the internal, we're focused very much on fixing everything internally and getting that in a really good place before we start shouting about it, because the worst thing you can do is go, oh my god, this is all amazing, and then you get into the process, it's like it's actually all smoke and mirrors. So we're very much still in that of working with the teams and get better communication with the hiring teams so that we've better foresight of what's coming up and actually adapting to what works on certain clients as well, so that we're keeping our near former, but we can get the right, you know, if there's a project where we need a particular background, where we get people that are a near former that have that, and yeah, working through of all those things so that whenever we do shout about stuff, we can confidently say we're doing it, rather than I've worked with previous companies that have wanted to shout about it first and then figure it out later. And that's not the way to do it.
Is there anything that was sort of put in place over at Clio then, Luke, sort of at the start, maybe last year, that you're seeing sort of was a benefit from that sort of attraction strategy? Is there anything that was put in place?
It's a good question. I think for us, you know, a lot of the roles we hire for are evergreen anyway, so there's not as much kind of specific strategies. You know, what we've really tried to push is just general employer brand and kind of giving more insights into actually what it's like to work at Clio. I think it's a different kind of side of a different kind of aspect of growth challenges when you are kind of growing at pace to actually get the right people in when you're interviewing so many people. So we want to just make sure that we're as transparent as possible about the culture, about the ways of working, about what it's actually like to be here. And we do that through kind of blogs and events and so on, to make sure, yeah, once someone's through the door, things actually align to what they expected it to be. And it's tough for us. I mean, we don't, or the app isn't actually live in the UK. It's a US based app, so we don't have much of a brand here. So again, it's kind of having to build that from the ground up, which can be quite challenging, but it's also a clean slate in that regard.
Yeah, we find that we do a lot like the open source community. That's the best branding for us. Like, that's not so much on like culture and hiring, but it's our engineers are like, we've built this really cool thing that helps devs. Devs latch on to that because they want to work at the company where people built that. That's costs nothing for a marketing team or whatever. It happens, and these people come to us and go, I watched a YouTube video by so and so, and they were wearing their open sources art t-shirt, and yeah, I want to work there. But much like you, like that seems to be big for us in Italy, of all places. So it's really helped Italian hiring, but for the UK, we still need to put some stuff in motion to make that right to a UK market.
I know one thing I've noticed is a lot more of a sort of drive to more events. It's a big thing that's coming up, especially with more in-person events. Obviously, I myself look at the London markets. We've done I do a lot of remote side of things, but I'm getting a lot more, especially on the tech side, the engineering side of things, people wanting to be back in and around people doing sort of meetups. Obviously, you mentioned there, Luke, that sort of your teams do sort of more events or anything like that. Has anyone seen those trends of people wanting to see more of that in terms of seeing if the companies are hosting more events, if they're doing more meetups, if they're encouraging? Is that anything that anyone's sort of seeing at the moment?
Yeah, I said we're doing quite a few, but like we're getting a lot of interest from people into like hackathons and some of like the Ruby boot camps that we kind of can get involved in. I think it's just kind of building that sense of community within the space as well. You know, people want to be part of that. So if we can facilitate that as an organization, then it stands in good stead to get people, you know, to get like-minded people through the door.
Agreed. And I think it's a lot about events that are targeted as well and have a search and using them tactically rather than just putting them on for the sake of it, which is what it probably was pre-COVID. Everyone wanted to be seen at an event. Whereas now it is like, no, actually this event ties into this strategy and it's a lot more thought through. Like, yeah, we send devs out to speak at tech conferences because we're so open source and node centric that we host NodeConf EU in Ireland every year. That's a Nearform massive event, takes a lot of work. But that is very much because we're so into the Node community and core contributions and stuff that it's like, well, we want to show that off. You know, there'd be no point in us going to a Ruby event, for example, because we don't touch it. But yeah, it's a lot more targeted now. I think that's the big thing with events now. But it's not just going to be seen at an event. It is because money's so tight across everyone. It's, well, what ROI is this bringing in?
No, excellent. And obviously looking then at sort of the other side of that sort of attraction piece is more the retention strategy. Having sort of been at the companies that are growing a lot, sort of we talked about events being seen there or pushing people more towards the upskilling, as Luke, you mentioned sort of hackathons and things like that. People wanted to do more. Is there anything on a retention side that people are seeing companies look at or try and implement? Obviously not just this year, but last year, that's seen an improvement on retention.
One big thing that we've done as an organization that's been in place long before I got here is we have very transparent progression frameworks. So it's all kind of published on our website too. We've had a lot of people, I guess, reach out to me over the last year or so saying, this is great, I'm copying bits and pieces, which obviously is fine. We should be crowdsourcing, stuff like that. But I think it's helped us with retention because it gives people a real insight into actually what life at Clio is going to be like before they join. I think we probably all joined a company at some point and you get in and you know, progression and development's a bit of a black box before you get there, and then you get there and you realize you've got to jump through all these hoops. So I think that's really helped us by just saying, okay, once you're in, this is what we expect of each level, this is how you develop, and this is how we're going to support you. We get a lot of, you know, people can make that decision as to whether that's what they want before they join, and so when they do join, they're likely to stay for a lot longer.
Yeah, of course. And oh, sorry, John, I think just in you unmuted. Have I cut you off?
I was just going to say that, like, funny enough, it's the same thing. That's what we're working on at the moment to make that a lot clearer for our team. That it's something that's come up in the first few months that I've been here that isn't necessarily there. And that's quite a big change actually from my experience of working with, particularly with kind of startups and scale-ups, where it wasn't actually that important. It was about being somewhere where things were just happening, and obviously progression is always important to an extent, but there was a lot more of a focus around kind of break things and work stuff out, and that's all fine and it'll all kind of come together. But actually I can see that people are moving, or in my experience, the last sort of year or so, people want that sort of structure behind them. They want to know that there's something kind of backing that up, and that people are thinking about it, even if it's not necessarily super well organized like it is at Clio. And I might steal some of that stuff that you suggested, but at least knowing that it's being thought about, and that's part of our kind of management piece as well, and that progression is happening for everyone, and seeing that internally happen, that's quite important. So I just wanted to echo it because that was something that has come up for us.
Where does that get implemented from? Is it from sort of top down, i.e. sort of not just the talent teams, it's coming from your engineering managers, your engineering leaders, or sort of is it then something that sort of the talent teams need to sort of not highlight, but put it under the microscope and make sure it's out there for the engineers or the other employees see? Sort of where does it get sort of brought into the wider team, sort of the wider company?
I think for us starting from scratch, it kind of has to come from the specific teams about what their expectations are, and from our process is going to be with our senior leadership team to talk about it in a sort of global sense across the company, and then looking at what the levels are of each of that would be expected by that specific job, and then piecing it together with where everyone is at any one point. So it's a fairly big piece of work that needs to be done, but you can do this in stages, which is what we're doing, so that you can have it there and then start to kind of morph them together into an overall look for everyone. But I think it has to come from the specific teams to start with, and then it's something that you kind of help to shape from a talent perspective, because you at least have that, how other companies are doing and benchmarking across there, and there's always going to be an element of compensation coming into that piece as well. So I think that talent teams, people teams are at the forefront of that and will know best how that is. So the way that we do that is that I would be involved in those meetings with our senior leadership team about what bonuses look like and what kind of our salary reviews are going to look like, because we have that external knowledge, or can at least see how markets are that they probably don't have.
Yeah, and obviously I think then sort of drawing on that as well, looking at that sort of wider market piece, sort of how has that research been sort of done, I suppose, well, historically, or how are you seeing it? Is it just from knowing or speaking with the people that are being interviewed and what they're getting offered, or is it sort of the knowledge sharing spaces that there are within the talent sort of community? How are you sort of going about identifying how you compare to other companies out there?
For us, it's a mixture of all those things.
Okay.
So I think it's trying to find a balance of places that you can get kind of enough information from them, or enough data for some stuff. Some of it is just, salary benchmarking that is available to get. Sometimes it's talking to, you specifically, Sam, since we went through that conversation when we were hiring someone. So sometimes it's that, and sometimes it's looking at the market too, where that you can kind of use that when you're hiring and you can find out what people are looking for. We've done that partly for our benefits as well, in terms of people that we've spoken to and what's important to them, and the way that we work, that you can start to get an idea. Although I'd say that's more anecdotal if you're doing it through just your hiring processes and how your talent team is feeling about who they're talking to. But from that, it's just doing a bit more research around with like the wider community. And generally speaking, my experience is that in people are fairly comfortable sharing that as well. So I don't feel like I'm just totally lucky that I've had people who will do that. I think that generally people are quite good at that. So there's quite a lot of options.
Yeah, echoing that, we use a mixture of like paid salary benchmarking tools because we work across different geographies that it can be difficult to just gather information as a talent team. But we also have the anecdotal side of whenever I was working at X company, this is what we did. Scouring, even sometimes just as whenever you see a LinkedIn post pop up and there's a salary report on it, downloading that and firing it into a shared Google Drive in the people team that everyone takes a read at whenever they've got a moment. And yeah, benefits wise, like taking what you can whenever you speak to people and what other people are asking about and what candidates are asking benefits wise. You know, the usuals, healthcare, pension, enhanced holidays, that's standard in our industry now. So everyone expects that as a base minimum, but you know, we talk about and the benefits that we get the best response to is that we work 99% remotely. We do a company get together where we fly everyone out somewhere, which some people are really into, some people hate the idea of. But what people are more interested in is we do like a every 2 years you get €1,250 for your work from home setup. So your chair, your desk, your headphones, effectively the stuff that does every 2 years. We have a lot of people with standing desks and Herman Miller chairs at Nearform. And that's what gets the most response because it's that sort of thing that whenever your office chair goes, it's really annoying that you have to then buy a new one and you take it for granted. And the way I tend to tell people that is we're not paying rent on offices in London, Manchester, Milan, etc. So everyone gets a little slice, which yeah seems to be what's most well received anyway.
I think a point you made there about sort of the benefits, obviously they used to be quite a norm across the industry, and you get this, you'll get a bonus, you'll get these things. But I know I've seen, especially with adverts, an increase in the side benefits. One point I wanted to draw back on was that learning and development piece. Obviously, Luke, you mentioned you've seen it a lot internally with people wanting to upskill. Has that been something that sort of you've looked at bringing into the team more from a sort of giving opportunities as sort of talent teams to have more upskilling? Sort of, is that something as a strategy that anyone's looked at?
Yeah, we've literally just kicked that off actually, kind of getting a learner blue budget for everyone within the business so they can focus on that L&D. And that's kind of factored into kind of personal development plans that people have on an individual level. And yeah, I guess, you know, echoing what Lindsay said, it's the focus now is kind of on well-being, it's on development, it's on work-life balance, and it's making sure people are comfortable and having, you know, a way of working that suits them. It's not like 3 years ago where you could sell people on the bonus and the share options, because I think everyone's seen what's happened to the industry and kind of, you know, how likely those things are to actually go ahead. So it's kind of, you know, bird in the hand rather than two in the bush, so to say, what's going to make me comfortable right now rather than however many millions you can promise me in 10 years time if we IPO.
Yeah, we have a similar, we do a bonus, but we make it really clear if it's based on company performance, and we didn't get the full amount for 2023, which normally the response is, you got some though, and it is like a surprise from it. But yeah, learning development, we've always done that, €1,000 a year, and then a certain amount of days you can take off. We have a load of in-house courses as well, just from being the niche that we're in and having the people in the community that we do. But it's a pick your course and expense it back. So if someone wants that to be on an AWS certification or, you know, within the people team toward a CIPD, we kind of thought it was the fairest way to do to everyone.
And I suppose then obviously a big thing in talent teams, you've got to look at being proactive or reactive and looking at the market and sort of how things are changing. How often do you reassess those learning points or those additional side benefits? Because obviously those those additionals will have changed, I imagine, quite significantly over the last couple of years. I know at least we've seen a lot of things change. So at what point do you sort of keep reassessing?
We do it annually, but with the caveat that we're not going to change everything annually, because there's quite a lot. So we'll look at things, we'll look at benchmarking, we'll look at kind of the benefits we offer, and it might be that we change 10% each year, but there's that kind of constant iteration. I think that's probably a better way of doing it than doing it every 4 years, but you change everything, so to say.
I think we're the same. Can't confirm, not been here a year.
No, of course. And I suppose then looking at the sort of hiring, because obviously I suppose the adage is that sort of it costs more to replace someone than it does to keep someone. Sort of how, from looking at the changes that we saw, obviously a load of people being let go last year, what sort of things might be coming up in the next year that could affect that? Because as Luke, you sort of pointed back to earlier, that those sort of other tech niches, climate tech, those sort of things, they're seeing more sort of investments, sort of they're coming up. How do you sort of ensure, or how do you plan for that sort of react, or are you proactive, sorry, in a way that you're planning for a certain amount of turnover to happen, or is it a case of sort of, right, we've lost people, then we sort of look, what's the best way to look at it, and sort of how do you go about it across obviously everyone here?
So with us, we're broadly looking at about 5% month-on-month headcount growth, but we factor in expected attrition into that. You know, and I think we're probably looking at a handful of people every month to leave. Sometimes it's through tenure, sometimes it's through performance. You know, I think it's healthy to have a certain level of attrition to keep the business fresh. Obviously, if it's less, great. If it's more, you know, a bit worrying. But I think you've got to factor it into some degree as part of growth.
I think, John, you were about to say something there.
Yeah, no, I agree with that about factoring it in. We actually, Treasury Spring has an incredible retention rate, which we're really lucky to have, although also starting as a people lead, coming in when not that many people have left ever, it adds a bit more pressure. But yeah, I agree with that. I think that you kind of have to build it into what you're doing. So from a talent perspective, it's just making sure that I would say generally it's about being reactive, probably to an extent, certainly from my perspective, you know, in a small team, but having enough process in place that means that that's fairly straightforward for everyone. So you're not necessarily planning and doing an enormous amount of work in the background in case anyone leaves. You just know that you have your processes set up so that when it does happen, hiring managers know what they're doing, you know what you're doing, and then it can be fairly seamless, so that you're not kind of under too much pressure, especially in a smallish company, where it has more impact when someone leaves. So just to make sure that we kind of use all that time really quickly once that news comes through, to make sure that they get replaced. Yeah, but as Luke said, I guess when you're growing at the same time, there's an element of sort of, you know, managing to double up that work, or, well, I don't know if I put that right, but do half the work, so that you're not losing too much time there. But I'm not sure that, from my perspective, I'm not sure that we can be massively proactive in that area. It's just about the proactivity is about being prepared for it to happen.
And obviously one big thing that obviously took place last year, I've seen a lot more things on sort of LinkedIn, especially at the moment, is the rise of people that have been let go being invited back to companies, especially the likes of, as you said, Meta laid off 20% of the sort of teams, and all of a sudden these roles 6 months later are being advertised or re-invited back. So employee branding is a massive thing that seems to be heavily affected last year. How do we go about then as a sort of team to sort of, I suppose, maybe capitalize on those companies that didn't do the best for their own employee branding? Then how do we obviously reinforce then our own employee branding within a talent team? Any thoughts?
I think, yeah, it's unfortunate kind of seeing like some Meta kind of go through that and let go a lot of people only to then reopen the roles. I think it kind of points to a lack of prior planning in terms of what's needed in the business. So I think really it kind of comes down to a business decision kind of influencing brand. As long as you're planning things properly and you're not making snap decisions, then that in itself is the brand of the business. You know, you want to be perceived as a well-run organization. And that in itself, you know, is probably arguably more impactful than whatever, you know, LinkedIn content you can create or events you can organize. Personally, I mean, obviously we want to do all of it, but yeah, I think, you know, stability is is the new kind of focus for lots of organizations.
Yeah, echoing that. Employer brand is in the mind, but it's still very much the same stuff we've been doing, taking over while we sort out our internal processes and get the balance right. And then once we know we've got that in place, then we'll start shouting out. We did an acquisition this year, so the business focus was, yeah, we're growing and we're going to promote that we acquired, but we also need to sort out all the integration before we add too much more onto our plates. There's not another acquisition coming anytime soon because we need to sort this one first. So yeah, employer brand will come. There'll be more on that. But yeah, like Luke said, everyone just sort of needs to get heads down and get the business ticking along first.
So for the next year, then obviously looking at sort of 2024 coming up, we're already in it obviously, but is there anything that sort of anyone's looking forward to more than on this retention and attraction piece? Is there anything people are excited to see change or see implemented? Is there anything that stands out to anyone individually?
I don't know if there's anything that stands out particularly from my perspective. From just personally in my role, we're very lucky in terms of how we're positioned. So I don't see that maybe there's the same challenges that a lot of companies have gone through the last couple of years, and it kind of just changes. Yeah, like I say, we're in a nice position so that it can change that focus. I guess that's probably my element of excitement, is that maybe that's where the industry moves towards, so that there's more focus on it from a people and from a talent perspective, that's how companies start to think and how our team starts to be looked at, I guess, from kind of compared to other teams, so that you can kind of have a clearer, ROI based on what you're doing that isn't entirely around, the equivalent of agency spend when you're hiring people. So I guess, yeah, from my perspective, that's a nice thing. But the other side is, like I said, there's also an added pressure to make sure that it's working, and it's quite new. I think there's gonna be a lot of stuff that comes up that we won't have experienced. I guess that's the one thing that I would say from the last 3 years is super clear that we've kind of gone through peaks and troughs that for reasons that no one would have known. So there's that as well that is a bit more pressured. So I think trying to make sure that we take our time and get things right is also important as we do that.
Yeah, similarly, really excited about doing stuff that isn't just CV sourcing. I think you can't just have a massive talent team that grows and grows and grows anymore. We've all seen that in the last 12 months. So it's how to utilize talent in the business. I did that at Nearform when I joined. We weren't actually hiring much, but we needed to pull in how we regionalize and combine the people and talent team again, because they'd been previously split. And that was really fun to do that. And yeah, it probably actually either saved the business money from people not leaving, or made the business more money from how we were able to place people better on different clients and better rates than it did from the equivalent of an agency fee being saved. So I think that's the exciting thing of going to have recruiters a lot more, not just being in-house agency recruiters effectively. It's going to be, yes, that's your core skill set, but all these other bits, in many ways going back 15-20 years to when it was still under HR, picking up all those different points.
Oh, sorry, Luke, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'd echo what Lindsey said entirely. I think there's a much more holistic view of talent management at the moment, beyond just attraction, but looking at, as we've discussed today, retention, but branding and everything else, and kind of talent being really immersed within the people space. I think it's definitely quite an interesting shift.
And one final point is tech. Has anyone got anything that they're seeing that coming up that is driving sort of on the recruitment side? Because everyone's seen, or we briefly mentioned, the buzzword that is AI and the amount of tools that are coming out. But has anyone seen anything that's going to be truly game changing within the headhunting space at the moment? Has anyone seen anything or started looking into any tools?
I mean, didn't they say this, that LinkedIn was going to make all recruiters redundant, and something before that was going to make all recruiters redundant? It's a people job. It can help us, but at the end of the day, people need to speak to people.
Yeah, agreed. I think you know, as much as it would be lovely to reinvent the wheel, Bill, good old-fashioned LinkedIn headhunting's the only way it's ever really going to work in my lifetime, I think.
Excellent. Well, obviously, I think we've covered some fantastic points there, as sort of we all mentioned, from sort of people and talent all the way through to branding and everything. And obviously, I personally just want to say thank you for joining me. I've obviously taken quite a few points here to maybe implement into my next time I reach out to an internal talent team, and I hope you've all taken learning points from each other as well. So yeah, thanks for joining me. It's been great having you.
Thanks.